Stop what you're doing. Look at your coffee cup. That dark, warm liquid you're holding right now has a secret. A secret so explosive it sparked wars, toppled empires, and changed the course of human history forever. Every single day, humans consume over 2 billion cups of coffee. That means right now, at this very moment, millions of people around the world are doing exactly what you're doing. But here's the shocking truth. This global obsession began with dancing goats. Yes, you heard that right. Dancing goats. 1,000 years ago, in the highlands of Ethiopia, a young goat herder made a discovery that would reshape civilization itself. He had no idea that his curious observation would create the world's second most traded commodity after oil, fuel the age of Enlightenment, and become the daily ritual that wakes up the modern world. This isn't just a story about a beverage. This is the story of human curiosity, accidental genius, and how the smallest discoveries can trigger the biggest changes in history. So take another sip, because you're about to discover how your morning routine connects you to ancient Ethiopian shepherds, Ottoman coffee houses, European revolutionaries, and a chain of events that literally built the world we live in today. The story begins in the misty highlands of Ethiopia, around the year 850 CE, where a young goat herder named Kaldi was about to change everything. Kaldi lived in the ancient kingdom of Kaffa, a region whose name would eventually give coffee its identity. The landscape was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in wild vegetation, ancient forests hiding mysterious plants, and mountain peaks that touched the clouds. Kaldi knew every inch of this territory, every path his goats preferred, every plant they enjoyed eating. He knew his goats better than anyone. Every day, he led them through the same mountain paths, watched them graze on the same plants, and guided them home as the sun set behind the ancient peaks. His goats had personalities, habits, preferences. Some were adventurous, always wandering toward new areas. Others were cautious, staying close to familiar feeding grounds. But on this particular morning, something was completely different. His goats were acting strange, not sick strange. Happy strange. They were jumping, dancing, practically bouncing off the mountainside with an energy Kaldi had never witnessed in his years of herding. These weren't young goats having fun. These were adult goats, normally calm and predictable, now behaving like they'd discovered the secret to eternal youth. Their eyes were bright, their movements were rapid and coordinated, almost like they were performing some kind of ritual dance. Kaldi followed their excited bleating and discovered them eating bright red berries from a shrub he'd walked past thousands of times before. The plant was unremarkable, just another piece of vegetation in the vast Ethiopian landscape. But today, his goats were consuming these berries with unprecedented enthusiasm, almost like they knew something he didn't. Curiosity overcame caution. Kaldi picked a handful of the berries and examined them closely. They were beautiful, actually. Deep red, almost burgundy, with a complex aroma that was both sweet and earthy. He tasted them carefully. The flavor was strange, bitter at first, then almost sweet with undertones he couldn't identify. But within minutes, something incredible happened to his body and mind. Energy coursed through his veins like lightning. His thoughts became sharper, clearer, more focused than ever before. The world around him seemed brighter, more vivid. He felt like he could climb every mountain in Ethiopia and still have energy to spare. His heart raced, but not with fear, with excitement and possibility. Excited by his discovery, Kaldi gathered more berries and rushed down the mountain to the nearest monastery. The monks were known throughout the region for their wisdom and their connection to spiritual matters. If anyone could explain what had happened, it would be them. He found a monk and breathlessly explained the miraculous transformation he had experienced. But the monk was not impressed. In fact, he was horrified. In an age when anything unusual was often attributed to supernatural forces, the monk saw only danger in Kaldi's discovery. "These berries are the work of the devil," he declared with conviction, and immediately threw Kaldi's precious discovery into the fire. The young shepherd watched in dismay as his magical berries disappeared into the flames. But then something truly magical happened. As the berries burned, the most incredible aroma began filling the monastery. Rich, complex, intoxicating. The smell was unlike anything the monks had ever experienced. It seemed to awaken something deep in their consciousness, calling to them with an almost mystical power. They couldn't help themselves. Drawn by the incredible fragrance, they pulled the roasted berries from the fire, crushing them between stones and mixing the powder with hot water. That night, for the first time in the monastery's history, the monks stayed awake through their entire prayer session, alert and focused until dawn. Their prayers felt deeper, more meaningful. Their minds were clear and receptive to spiritual insights that had previously eluded them. The world's first cup of coffee had been born. Not through careful planning or scientific research, but through the curiosity of a shepherd, the fear of a monk, and the happy accident of berries falling into fire. From these humble monastic origins, coffee began its incredible journey. Word of this miraculous brew spread quickly across the Arabian Peninsula. By the 15th century, coffee cultivation was thriving in Yemen. It was there, in the port city of Mocha, that coffee's global conquest truly began. Mocha became the world's first major coffee hub, a name so synonymous with the drink that we still use it today. Sufi mystics in Yemen embraced coffee, using it to stay awake for their late-night religious ceremonies. They called it kahwa, an Arabic word that originally meant wine of the bean. From the mystics, the drink's popularity exploded. Coffee houses, known as kahve khane, began to spring up in cities across the Middle East, from Mecca to Cairo and Damascus. These weren't just places to get a drink. They were schools of the wise, vibrant centers of social and intellectual life. People from all walks of life gathered to play chess, listen to music, discuss news, and debate politics. Coffee fueled conversations that lasted long into the night, creating a new kind of public space where ideas could be freely exchanged. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Religious leaders grew suspicious of these lively coffee houses, seeing them as dens of political dissent and distraction from religious duties. Several attempts were made to ban coffee, but the public's love for the drink was too strong. The bans never lasted long, and coffee continued its unstoppable march across the globe. By the 17th century, coffee finally arrived in Europe, brought by Venetian merchants trading with the East. At first, it was viewed with suspicion. It was the drink of the Ottoman Empire, the bitter invention of Satan. But when Pope Clement VIII was asked to ban it, he decided to taste it first. He was so delighted by its flavor that he famously baptized it, declaring it a truly Christian beverage. With the Pope's blessing, Europe went crazy for coffee. Coffee houses opened in London, Paris, Vienna, and Amsterdam, quickly becoming the epicenters of the Age of Enlightenment. These were the internet cafes of their day. In London, institutions like Lloyd's of London, which became the world's leading insurance market, and the London Stock Exchange were born in coffee houses. In Paris, coffee houses were the meeting places for revolutionaries like Voltaire and Rousseau, who sipped the dark brew while planning the overthrow of the French monarchy. Coffee fueled intellectual revolutions, scientific breakthroughs, and financial empires. It sharpened the minds of Isaac Newton, Voltaire, and Benjamin Franklin. It was the essential fuel for the thinkers and doers who were building the modern world. The demand was insatiable, and European powers, desperate to control the supply, went to extraordinary lengths to break the Arab monopoly on coffee cultivation. The Dutch were the first to succeed, smuggling coffee plants out of Yemen and establishing massive plantations in their colonies in Java and Sumatra. Soon after, a French naval officer named Gabriel de Clieu undertook a perilous journey to bring a single coffee seedling to the island of Martinique in the Caribbean. He protected the plant with his life, even sharing his own water ration with it during a long voyage. That single seedling became the ancestor of billions of coffee trees throughout Central and South America. This expansion, however, had a dark side. The explosive growth of coffee plantations in the Americas and Asia was built on the backs of enslaved people. The same drink that fueled intellectual freedom in European coffeehouses was produced through immense suffering and exploitation in the colonies. It's a bitter irony that is a crucial and often overlooked part of coffee's history. The story of your coffee cup is a story of incredible contrasts. It's a story of dancing goats and enlightened philosophers, of mystics and merchants, of revolution and exploitation. From a single shrub in the Ethiopian highlands, coffee has spread to every corner of the planet, shaping economies, cultures, and daily routines. So the next time you take a sip of your morning coffee, remember its extraordinary journey. You're not just drinking a beverage. You're participating in a ritual that connects you to 1,000 years of history. You're connected to Khaldi, the goat herder, to the Sufi mystics, to the Enlightenment thinkers, and to the complex global network that brings this magical drink to your cup. That simple act of brewing coffee in your kitchen is the final step in a chain of events that started with a happy accident and changed the world forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories behind the things we use every day. See you next time. Word of this miraculous drink began to spread throughout the mountainous regions of Ethiopia and across the Red Sea to Yemen. But coffee's zero transformation from local secret to global phenomenon happened in the hands of Sufi mystics in 5th-10th century Yemen. These religious seekers needed something to help them stay awake during long nights of prayer and spiritual contemplation. Their mystical practices required sustained attention and mental clarity that ordinary food and drink couldn't provide. Coffee became their answer. The Sufis didn't just drink coffee, they elevated it into an art form. They developed the first systematic approaches to roasting, grinding, and brewing, treating each step as a sacred ritual. They discovered that different roasting times produced dramatically different flavors and effects. Light roasts were bright and acidic, perfect for morning prayers. Medium roasts were balanced and smooth, ideal for afternoon contemplation. Dark roasts were rich and bitter, providing intense energy for late-night spiritual practices. They learned to listen for the precise moment when the beans cracked during roasting. A sound they called the first crack and the second crack. Each crack signaled a different stage in flavor development. The Sufis understood that roasting was a transformation, a process that unlocked the hidden potential within each coffee bean. In small clay pots over carefully tended fires, the Sufis created the first sophisticated coffee brewing rituals. Every step had meaning, every gesture had purpose. Water had to be heated to precise temperatures. Grounds had to be measured with mathematical precision. Brewing time had to be monitored with devotional attention. The preparation became a form of meditation, a way to transform simple ingredients into something transcendent. They called their drink kawa, meaning that which gives strength, or that which prevents sleep. But for the Sufis, coffee was more than a stimulant. It was a tool for spiritual exploration, a bridge between the physical and metaphysical worlds. Coffee helped them achieve states of consciousness that enhanced their connection to the divine. From these Yemeni monasteries, coffee began its journey into the wider Islamic world. Sufi travelers carried coffee to Mecca, Cairo, Damascus, and Constantinople. By the early 1500s, the first public coffeehouses opened in the holy city of Mecca. These establishments represented something revolutionary in human social organization. They weren't just places to drink coffee, they became the world's first democratic forums, physical spaces where people of different social classes could gather as equals. The atmosphere inside these coffeehouses was electric with intellectual energy. Men sat cross-legged on ornate carpets, sipping coffee from small porcelain cups while engaging in animated conversations about everything from poetry to philosophy to international trade routes. The coffeehouses became known as schools of the wise because visitors could learn more in an hour of coffeehouse conversation than in days of formal study. These gathering places developed their own customs and etiquette. Coffee was served in multiple small cups rather than single large ones, encouraging extended conversation and social interaction. Professional storytellers entertained patrons with epic tales and historical narratives. Chess players competed in tournaments that could last for days. Musicians performed traditional songs and improvised new compositions inspired by the energy and atmosphere of coffeehouse culture. But coffee's growing popularity made some political and religious authorities extremely nervous. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, Karbag, banned coffee completely after observing that coffeehouse patrons were engaging in political discussions that sometimes criticized government policies. He declared that coffee houses were centers of sedition where people gathered to plot rebellion against legitimate authority. The governor argued that coffee drinkers were becoming lazy and undisciplined, spending too much time in conversation and not enough time working or engaging in traditional religious practices. He claimed that coffee consumption was making people question authority and think independently, which he saw as dangerous to social order. The ban created immediate controversy throughout the Islamic world. Coffee drinkers protested that their beverage was perfectly compatible with religious observance and actually enhanced their ability to pray and study. Religious scholars debated whether coffee should be considered similar to alcohol, which was prohibited or classified as a legitimate food product. The controversy reached the Ottoman Sultan in Constantinople, who overturned the ban after consulting with religious experts and trying coffee himself. The Sultan declared that coffee was permissible under Islamic law and that coffee houses could continue operating as long as they maintained order and respect for authority. This pattern would repeat throughout coffee's history. Wherever coffee went, it brought both enlightenment and controversy. The beverage that could stimulate minds also stimulated social change, and not everyone in power appreciated that effect. Coffee houses became associated with intellectual freedom, democratic discussion, and social mobility concepts that threatened traditional hierarchies. Despite periodic bans and restrictions, coffee continued spreading throughout the Ottoman Empire. Constantinople developed the most sophisticated coffee culture in the world, with hundreds of coffee houses serving different neighborhoods and social groups. Cairo's coffee houses became famous for their literary discussions and poetry readings. Damascus attracted merchants who conducted international business over coffee. Aleppo developed a reputation for the highest quality coffee preparation techniques. Each city added its own variations to coffee preparation and service. Some regions added spices like cardamom, cinnamon, or cloves to create distinctive flavor profiles. Others developed elaborate serving rituals involving multiple small cups and extended social ceremonies that could last for hours. The Ottoman coffee culture established many traditions that survive today around the world. Coffee became universally associated with hospitality, friendship, and intellectual discourse. The phrase, "a cup of coffee commits 1 to 40 years of friendship," entered Turkish culture and spread throughout the region. Coffee houses became informal universities where scholars, merchants, artists, and ordinary citizens could meet as equals, united by their shared appreciation for this remarkable beverage. But coffee's biggest transformation was yet to come. European travelers returning from the Ottoman Empire brought stories of this incredible drink that could keep people awake and alert without making them drunk or sluggish like alcohol. Merchants, diplomats, and adventurers described coffee houses as centers of learning and culture, unlike anything that existed in European cities. By the early 1600s, coffee had reached Venice through trade connections with the Ottoman Empire. Venetian merchants, always alert to profitable opportunities, began importing small quantities of coffee for wealthy customers curious about exotic Eastern luxuries. From Venice, coffee began its systematic conquest of European cities, spreading north through trade routes and diplomatic connections. Coffee's arrival in Christian Europe created immediate and intense controversy. Many religious authorities condemned it as Satan's drink, arguing that anything so popular in Muslim lands must be inherently dangerous for Christians. They claimed that coffee was a tool of the devil designed to corrupt Christian souls and lead believers away from traditional religious practices. The debate raged in churches, universities, and royal courts across Europe. Some theologians argued that coffee's stimulating effects were unnatural and violated God's design for human consciousness. Others worried that coffee houses would undermine traditional social structures by creating new forms of public gathering that bypassed church and state authority. The controversy reached such intensity that Pope Clement VIII decided to investigate personally. According to historical accounts, the Pope requested that coffee be brought to him so he could taste it and make an informed theological judgment. After taking his first sip, Pope Clement reportedly smiled and declared, "This Satan-shes drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall cheat Satan by baptizing it." With papal approval, coffee houses began opening throughout European cities. But European coffee culture developed quite differently from its Middle Eastern predecessor. European coffee houses became centers of business, politics, and intellectual revolution, rather than primarily religious or social gathering places. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance market that still operates today, began as Edward Lloyd's Coffee House, where ship owners gathered to share information about maritime risks, cargo values, and shipping schedules. The London Stock Exchange evolved from coffee house conversations about trade opportunities and investment risks. These institutions transformed coffee houses from simple drinking establishments into the foundations of modern capitalism. In Paris, coffee houses became gathering places for philosophers and revolutionaries who would later inspire the French Revolution. The Café Procope, opened in 1686, attracted intellectual giants like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot. Voltaire reportedly consumed 40 cups of coffee per day and lived to be 83, proving that coffee was compatible with both intellectual brilliance and remarkable longevity. Vienna developed its own distinctive coffee culture after Ottoman armies retreating from their failed siege of the city in 1683 left behind hundreds of bags of coffee beans. A Polish spy named Franz Kolszycki, who had lived in the Ottoman Empire and understood coffee's value, claimed the abandoned beans as his reward for his wartime intelligence services. Kolschitsky opened Vienna's first coffee house and began the Austrian tradition of serving coffee with milk and sugar, creating the ancestors of modern cappuccinos and lattes. Viennese coffee houses became famous for their literary atmosphere, with newspapers from across Europe available for patrons and writers gathering to discuss their latest works. But Europe faced a fundamental economic problem with coffee. The beverage could only be grown in tropical climates with specific altitude, soil, and weather conditions. All the world's coffee production was concentrated in regions controlled by the Ottoman Empire, Ethiopia, or other non-European powers. European nations were spending enormous amounts of gold and silver to purchase coffee, creating significant trade imbalances that threatened their economic stability. The Dutch were the first to solve this problem through what amounted to sophisticated agricultural espionage. In 1616, Dutch merchants managed to smuggle living coffee plants out of Yemen despite strict Ottoman prohibitions against exporting coffee cultivation materials. They successfully established coffee plantations in their colonies in Java and Ceylon, breaking the Arab monopoly on coffee production for the first time in history. The Dutch coffee plantations were remarkably successful, producing high-quality coffee that could compete with the best Ottoman varieties. Dutch merchants made enormous profits by selling this colonial coffee throughout Europe at prices significantly lower than imported Ottoman coffee. The Dutch became Europe's primary coffee suppliers and one of the wealthiest trading nations in the world. Other European colonial powers quickly recognized the strategic importance of coffee production and launched their own efforts to establish coffee plantations. The French established coffee cultivation in their Caribbean colonies, particularly Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Saint-Domingue, now Haiti. According to historical legend, the French coffee industry in the Americas began with a single plant transported from Paris to Martinique in 1723 by a young naval officer named Gabriel de Clieu. The transatlantic journey was extraordinarily dangerous, with pirates, storms, and water shortages threatening both ship and cargo. Historical accounts suggest that de Clieu shared his own limited drinking water ration with the coffee plant to keep it alive during the voyage. From that single surviving plant, millions of coffee trees eventually spread throughout the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. The economic impact was enormous, transforming these regions into major coffee-producing areas that generated massive wealth for European colonial powers. However, the expansion of coffee cultivation came with a devastating human cost that cannot be ignored. Coffee plantations relied heavily on enslaved African labor, and the growth of coffee production directly contributed to the expansion and intensification of the Atlantic slave trade. Millions of Africans were forcibly transported to coffee-growing regions where they worked under brutal conditions to produce the coffee that Europeans craved. The wealth generated by coffee plantations built on enslaved labor funded European industrial development, architectural projects, and cultural institutions. The comfortable coffeehouse culture of European cities was directly connected to the suffering of enslaved people, working on distant plantations. This dark aspect of coffee's history reminds us that global trade networks have always involved complex moral and economic relationships. By the late 1700s, coffee had become one of the world's most important and valuable commodities. European colonial powers competed fiercely to control coffee-producing regions, and fluctuations in coffee prices could determine the economic fate of entire nations. The beverage that had begun as a local discovery in Ethiopia was now shaping global politics, economics, and the rise and fall of empires. The American colonies developed their own complex relationship with coffee, though tea remained the preferred hot beverage until political events dramatically changed consumer preferences. Coffee was available in American cities, but it was expensive and considered somewhat exotic compared to the familiar comfort of tea drinking. Everything changed with the Boston Tea Party in 1773, when American colonists dumped British tea into Boston Harbor to protest taxation without representation. Coffee drinking suddenly became a patriotic act for Americans rebelling against British rule. Coffee became the unofficial beverage of the American Revolution, as colonists associated tea with British oppression and coffee with independence and freedom. Coffee houses in American cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Boston became centers of revolutionary activity and political organization. The Green Dragon Coffee House in Boston was nicknamed the headquarters of the Revolution because so many important meetings and planning sessions took place there. Coffee fueled both the intellectual discussions that shaped American political philosophy and the practical planning that organized resistance to British rule. The 19th century brought dramatic industrialization to coffee production and consumption, transforming coffee from an artisanal product to a mass-market commodity. New technologies revolutionized every aspect of the coffee trade, from cultivation and processing to transportation and retail distribution. Steam-powered ships reduced transportation time from coffee-growing regions to consumer markets from months to weeks, ensuring that fresher coffee reached consumers and reducing spoilage during long ocean voyages. Improved roasting techniques and equipment created more consistent flavors and higher quality products that could be produced at industrial scales. The invention of vacuum packaging in the 1800s allowed roasted coffee to maintain its flavor and aroma for extended periods, making it possible to distribute coffee over long distances without significant quality loss. This technological advance enabled the development of national coffee brands and standardized products. In 1901, Italian inventor Luigi Bizzarra created the first espresso machine, designed to brew coffee quickly and efficiently for busy industrial workers. The espresso machine used steam pressure to force hot water through finely ground coffee in less than a minute, producing a concentrated, flavorful shot of coffee that provided immediate energy. This innovation transformed coffee from a leisurely drink prepared at home or consumed during extended social gatherings into a quick energy boost, perfect for the fast-paced rhythms of industrial urban life. Espresso machines appeared in Italian cafes, creating a new model of coffee consumption based on speed, efficiency, and intense flavor. The invention of instant coffee in 1906 by Belgian-American inventor George Washington, not the president, but a chemist who happened to share the name, represented another revolutionary advance in coffee convenience. Instant coffee could be prepared anywhere hot water was available, making it perfect for soldiers, travelers, office workers, and anyone who needed quick caffeine without brewing equipment. World War I and World War II dramatically expanded global coffee consumption and introduced coffee culture to populations that had previously been unfamiliar with it. Military rations included instant coffee, and soldiers from coffee drinking and non-coffee drinking cultures alike developed strong appreciation for coffee's ability to provide energy, comfort, and a sense of normalcy in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. Returning veterans brought their coffee habits home with them, spreading coffee culture to rural areas and regions where it had previously been less popular. The shared experience of wartime coffee consumption created cultural bridges between different social and economic groups who had served together in military units. The post-war economic boom of the 1950s and 1960s created unprecedented opportunities for coffee, innovation, and mass marketing. Major brands like Folgers, Maxwell House, and Nescafe became household names through aggressive advertising campaigns that positioned coffee as absolutely essential to modern American life and success. The famous Maxwell House slogan, "Good to the last drop," became one of the most recognizable advertising phrases in American culture. Television commercials showed happy families starting their days with coffee, successful businessmen drinking coffee in modern offices, and social gatherings centered around coffee service. But the most significant transformation in modern coffee culture began in 1971, when three friends opened a small specialty coffee shop in Seattle's Pike Place Market. Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Boker named their store Starbucks after the first mate in Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick. Initially, Starbucks operated as a simple retailer selling high-quality coffee beans and brewing equipment to home enthusiasts. Everything changed when Howard Schultz joined the company in the 1980s as Director of Retail Operations and Marketing. Schultz had been inspired by Italian espresso bars during a business trip to Milan, where he observed that coffee drinking was a central social ritual that brought communities together throughout the day. He envisioned transforming Starbucks from a coffee bean retailer into something unprecedented, a chain of coffee shops that would serve as third places between home and work. Comfortable environments where people could relax, socialize, work, and enjoy carefully prepared coffee drinks made by skilled baristas. The Starbucks model revolutionized coffee consumption worldwide, creating a template that thousands of independent coffee shops and competing chains would eventually adopt. Coffee drinks became customizable experiences with dozens of variations in size, flavor, milk type, sweetness level, and preparation method. Coffee shops evolved into mobile offices where people worked on laptops and tablets, informal meeting spaces for business and social occasions, comfortable environments for reading and studying, and community gathering places that served multiple social functions simultaneously. The specialty coffee movement, often called the third wave of coffee culture, elevated coffee from a simple commodity beverage to an artisanal experience comparable to fine wine or craft beer. Coffee enthusiasts began paying attention to the specific geographic origins of coffee beans, the altitude and soil conditions where they were grown, the harvesting and processing methods used, and the roasting techniques that brought out distinctive flavor characteristics. Professional coffee competitions emerged where skilled baristas competed to create the perfect espresso, cappuccino, or innovative coffee drink. These competitions elevated coffee preparation to the level of culinary art, with winners achieving celebrity status within the coffee community. Coffee cupping sessions, similar to wine tastings, allowed enthusiasts to appreciate the subtle differences between coffees from different regions, farms, and processing methods. Tasters learned to identify specific flavor notes, aromas, and characteristics that distinguished high-quality specialty coffees from mass-market commercial products. Today, coffee culture continues evolving with new brewing methods like pour-over techniques, French press, and cold brew preparations that emphasize different aspects of coffee's complex flavor profile. Sustainable farming practices and fair trade initiatives have emerged in response to consumer awareness about the working conditions and economic welfare of coffee farmers in developing countries. The global coffee industry now employs over 100 million people worldwide, from smallholder farmers in tropical highlands to baristas in urban coffee shops. Coffee-growing regions in Central and South America, Africa, and Asia depend on coffee exports for significant portions of their national economies and foreign currency earnings. The commodity that began with dancing goats in Ethiopia now supports entire nations and connects every continent through complex trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and shared daily rituals that transcend political boundaries and cultural differences. Coffee's extraordinary journey from accidental discovery to global obsession reveals something profound about human nature and our remarkable capacity for transformation and connection. A simple plant discovered by a curious shepherd became the foundation for entire industries, cultural movements, and social institutions that continue evolving today. Coffeehouses became birthplaces of stock exchanges, insurance markets, and revolutionary movements that shaped modern democracy and capitalism. Coffee rituals became expressions of hospitality, friendship, and community across cultures worldwide, creating shared experiences that unite people despite their differences. Perhaps most remarkably, coffee demonstrates how individual curiosity and innovation can reshape civilization itself. Kaldi's willingness to taste unknown berries, Sufi mystics' dedication to perfecting brewing techniques, European entrepreneurs' determination to break geographical monopolies, and modern innovators' vision of coffee culture as social experience all contributed to coffee's extraordinary evolution. Your morning coffee cup connects you to this entire remarkable history. The beans might have grown on a mountainside in Guatemala, where farmers still harvest by hand using techniques passed down through generations. They were processed using methods that combine traditional knowledge with modern technology shipped across oceans on routes established by centuries of global trade. Roasted with precision timing and temperature control that would amaze the original Sufi coffee masters, ground to exact specifications, and brewed using methods that represent the accumulated wisdom of countless coffee enthusiasts. Every sip carries within it the accumulated knowledge and experience of countless individuals who contributed to coffee development over more than 1,000 years of human innovation. You're participating in a daily ritual shared by billions of people worldwide. A moment of pause and reflection that transcends cultural, economic, and political boundaries. Coffee teaches us that the most extraordinary transformations often begin with the most ordinary observations. A shepherd noticed his goats acting strangely. Monks discovered that burned berries created intoxicating aromas. Merchants realized that distant populations craved unfamiliar beverages. Entrepreneurs understood that people wanted gathering places that felt like extensions of home and community. So tomorrow morning, when you take your first sip of coffee, remember that you're continuing a story that began with dancing goats and curious shepherds in ancient Ethiopia. You're participating in humanity's greatest accidental discovery, a reminder that the most powerful forces in our world often emerge from the simplest moments of wonder, investigation, and human connection. The story of coffee is ultimately the story of human civilization itself. Our endless curiosity about the world around us, our ability to transform simple discoveries into complex, global systems, and our fundamental desire to gather together, share experiences, and find meaning in the everyday rituals that give structure and comfort to our lives.